Hi, I think we're live, and just gonna make sure that I've got everything up and running, because last week I didn't have any comments showing up, so I want to make sure that that happens this time. So I'm just going to write in the comments now. Hi there. And it would be great if you join, you would like to comment and introduce yourselves along the way. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sophie Burch, aka the Mama Coach, and I've created the Beyond Birth guide primarily for mental well-being and mindfulness for early parenting, so late pregnancy and early parenting. I have 4 children of my own. My eldest is 14 and my younger twins are 7. So you may think, well, she's on the other side of all this. Why is she doing this? Well, I feel even more strongly now and passionately that this is the right time to be presenting this information to all of you. And dealing with the mental and the psychological aspects of becoming a parent is not something that many people are used to talking about. And it's my firm belief, hi Abby, that we really do need to start broaching this conversation, having it more with our family, our friends, and hopefully that will help us along the way. It's a big time of transformation, and it's full of ups and downs and lots of in-betweens. And in my experience as a professional therapist, coach, facilitator, teacher, whatever you want to call me, I've got many strings to my bow, but my experience over the 14 years is that if we bottle up how we're feeling, it will come out somehow in other ways. So I feel it's really important to talk about our emotions, and that's why I've added an entire section to the emotions in this guide. And I want to be talking about it in this group, and I want people to be honest about how they're feeling, because if we can out this stuff, then it lessens its power. The moment we enable it to come out, however we do that, whether it's by talking to somebody or by writing it down, we are able to lessen the power that it has over us. Okay, hello Steph. So please say hi if you've joined, just type in the comments, hello. And we will get having a conversation hopefully. So I've made some notes to go through essentially what I've got in the guide. I'm not going to be able to cover it all. There's quite a lot. Hi, Stevie. Hello. However, if you've got questions that you would like specifically answered by me this evening, then now's your chance to pop them in the comments. And if not, then watch and learn. But I would really love it if we could get this community going in terms of being really supportive for each other. And of course, I will show up as often as I possibly can for you. And hopefully we can all feel like we are in this together, because even though I'm a little bit further down the line than some of you are, the compassion I feel for you is enormous, which is why I've created this guide. So, emotions. How do you feel about emotions? How do we generally feel about emotions? Essentially, we want the good emotions in our life, don't we? We seek the good stuff because, of course, naturally it makes us feel good. And we attempt to shy away from the bad stuff. Often if we have very strong emotional responses to things that happen in our life, we find that very difficult to deal with, depending on how you've been brought up, because it really does go back to how you were parented yourself as to how you managed to learn, how your brains were wired to be able to regulate and cope with emotion in terms of the way you respond to emotions generally, okay? So when you are becoming a parent for the first time, you will come up against a variety of emotions and emotional responses. And some of it will be wonderful. Some of it will be emotion like you've never experienced before in such a good, positive, and most beautiful way. And I really can't wait for you to experience that unless you already are, which is just wonderful, and do tell us about it. But also you will experience really intense emotions on the other side of the coin too. And one thing most of us do when we experience this is we kind of try to avoid it. We try to shovel it underneath the carpet. We try to ignore it because we don't want to have to deal with it, because it doesn't sit comfortably. And it can appear in all sorts of ways. So it could be anxiety that crops up and sits heavy on your chest. And you're thinking, where's this come from? A lot of the time, especially in early parenting and going on for the first few years, depending on how your babies are sleeping, a lot of the emotion stems from being very tired. And when you are at your most tired, you are hopefully not exhausted, but probably feeling like it's pretty relentless. And as a result, wondering if you're matching up to your expectations or the expectations that others give you or place on you. And perhaps you're not feeling so much in control of things as you'd like to. And even though you're getting those lovely moments of closeness and attachment, hopefully with your infant, with your little one, those can be overthrown by, and we miss those moments because we're focused on how tired we are, essentially. And when we are tired, we are vulnerable. And when we are vulnerable, we go into a state of stress in our minds, where our bodies are releasing the stressor hormones. So that's cortisol, possibly also adrenaline. And we go into this state of needing to fix things, needing to make it right, needing to do something about it, even if we don't necessarily have the control over it. And depending on how your birthing experience goes, or depending on how your pregnancy and then your birth experience goes, obviously that all depends on how much stress hormone you have in your body and adrenaline already. So taking that into consideration and adding in the tiredness that comes from the lack of sleep that you're used to having, we can have a combination of a very emotional experience, okay? Lots of different thoughts and feelings cropping up here. And it can be particularly difficult if also you are not feeling particularly supported. Now, this goes for all parents and all caregivers. We don't necessarily have the support network, the village that we used to have. And even if we do have people close around us, the kind of ways that we communicate with people these days, and this is a generalization, is not as open as perhaps it needs to be, because we are afraid of facing up to things a lot of the time. And especially if it's people that we know or that know us well, we are also not wanting to let them down, or worried about how they're going to judge us, how it will affect them, whatever it is, okay? So sometimes when we're feeling very emotional, it can really help to reach out and talk to somebody that you don't know, to go on a chat room or a group like this and say, I'm actually feeling really awful right now. Is anybody out there able to just talk to me? Obviously, professionals like myself are used to holding space for people to enable them to feel heard. And that is not an easy thing to do, not in terms of me, but in terms of anybody that comes to me. It's a big step reaching out. But if things are getting too much for you, then that is the really sensible thing to do, because we're nipping it in the bud before it gets any worse. Now, the guide that I've created is a therapeutic tool, really, to get you just to start thinking a little bit deeper about how you can support yourself when you are experiencing strong emotions. That also means the good stuff. Because when you are experiencing good, beautiful, amazing, air-punching emotional responses and emotions that are sitting and buzzing around your body, you want to be able to bank those moments too. So taking a mindful approach to your emotions as they sit in your body, when you notice the responses that are coming up, can be really, really useful. And it helps to remind us to just be with that emotion sometimes, rather than trying to fix it, trying to change it, trying to do anything over it, because a lot of the time we actually have very little control over these times. And so being quite accepting and allowing that to be there is probably the kindest thing that you can do for yourself. But of course, in our modern day society, we are always seeking the answers, always trying to control what is happening next. But of course, when we have our babes in arms, how much can we really control? We cannot control the amount of crying they do. Sometimes babies cry more, some more than others, and usually it's down to levels of cortisol in their systems. It can be all sorts of other reasons too. And it's about understanding in those moments that it is not your fault, as long as you have addressed all the needs of your baby, i.e. they are fed, they are loved, they are warm, they are changed, their nappies are changed, and they've had some sleep. If all of that is dealt with and your baby is still crying and they're not really in pain, but they're just crying for long periods of time, then that can be tremendously difficult on your emotional response. And instead of running around like a headless chicken, which is exactly what you feel like doing, what can I do? How can I make it better? One of the kindest things you can do for yourself is actually just to sit and nurture you in those moments and see if you can manage those emotions in that way. So I've given you some examples in the guide of how to cope with these moments as best as possible. And the audio, one of the audio tracks I've given you also is about coping when your baby is crying. So it's particularly good if you've got a baby that is colicky or just really unsettled. And even if you've got a baby that's teething, an older baby that is teething, then these techniques are particularly useful. So it's about recognizing that really strong emotional response that comes up in you. And a lot of the time, it's, of course, that fight, flight, or freeze, where you feel like you either want to run away, can't make this better, how do I deal with it, just let it go away, or you just literally feel like doing something awful, or you just think, I'm helpless, and freeze. And what do I do? I can't think of anything. Your brain goes into freeze mode. You cannot think of anything. And you become reactive rather than proactive. And so the kindest thing you can do for yourself in those moments is to see if you can ground yourself, stabilize, be in that moment instead of trying to fix it, trying to change it, just being there. And your babies need you to be there too. They need you. Now, there used to be lots of old wives' tales about babies that are manipulative, babies that cry because they're being manipulative, and they're naughty babies, they're bad babies, but that's not true. And science is behind this now, that babies are completely incapable of being manipulative. Okay, that, that's later on. So they will just be expressing a need. They will be needing to have their emotional or their physical needs met in those moments. And the only way they know how to tell you is by crying. And that's hard sometimes. That is particularly difficult. And there may be days when you really feel like you're nailing it and like you can stop your baby crying quite quickly and you're like, I'm really getting this, and you get into the rhythm and the flow. And then you might have days as well where you are just thinking, I can't do this. I just can't bear it anymore. And of course, your baby's cries are designed specifically to get you up and doing something about it or addressing that need. So if this has been going on a long time and you are having very strong emotional responses to this, then taking a mindful approach of actually sitting and being with it and giving your mind a moment of stillness, a moment of peace, even with a crying baby going on in the background or in your arms, you are capable of doing this. We are capable of actually tuning out noise or even tuning into it enough so that we feel that we can be with it. Now, that is, I appreciate, a skill that is learned over time. Some may be able to deal with it a little bit better than others. It very much depends, again, on your personal experiences up until that moment. But I would certainly say that in terms of supporting, if you have a partner or you have somebody with you that is supporting you, then this time can be very raw, and it can bring out the worst in you. And it may well be a time when you are not used to seeing that in each other. If this is your first baby, then it may well be all very, very new. And as a result of having new, of course, we have that fear of lack of control, the fear of the unknown. And that can also bring up a lot of emotion in us that we feel that we are unable to cope with. But all emotion is there for a reason. It is all good. Even if it doesn't feel good at the time, it can help us to address our needs if we can be aware of those emotions and what they're there for and why. So it can help us to be a little bit more inquisitive about them. So even when you're at your most tired and raw, you can do things to help yourselves, and it doesn't have to be big things. So we're talking little things. We're talking, how can you cope? So thinking about how you cope normally in a stressful situation. Take a moment now just to think about that. Think, how do I normally cope when I get completely freaked out and something happens that I'm not expecting it, or I feel out of control? How do I cope? What do I do? Think about that. And if you like, just write down in the comments here. Say, what do you do? What do you do when you're feeling a negative emotional response? You're feeling quite reactive. You feel like you can't deal with it anymore. Anybody have anything to say? For me, personally, before I learned about mindfulness and all the stuff that I know now, I used to flare up really quickly. I'd get really, really cross. I'd be like, oh, and I'd shout. Yeah. So Stevie says normally snap at someone. Yeah. It's like you try to control it by being reactive in that way as well. So it's like, wow, what's going on? I can't deal with this. I'm fed up. And that's normal. It's very normal reaction to something that we're feeling. We've had enough of something. We're feeling out of control. And yeah, and then what do? We regret it. We're like, oh, shouldn't have done that. Really shouldn't have reacted like that. And then, of course, what happens? You get the emotional response of shame and guilt. And then they sit with you and then really make you feel rubbish, don't they? So you're already feeling rubbish, and then you've got that piled on top of you, so you're feeling even more rubbish. In those moments, one of the kindest things you can do is forgive yourself and realize that actually you've just had a very normal reaction to something that, pushed your buttons. But what you can also do is start to be more mindful and bring in a more mindful approach to your life. And what happens as a result of that is that you become less reactive, or you have coping strategies in place that mean that instead of flaring up, you leave the room. Or instead of shouting, you take some deep breaths and you hold on gently to something to ground yourself, and you sit a bit further into your chair and you think, I can deal with this, it's okay. And even if you do that after you've reacted, it will be very useful in terms of lowering your stressor hormones, because it'll be triggering your parasympathetic nervous system. But I know that sometimes thinking about breathing when you have just become very, very stressed and reactive is pretty impossible to do. So it has to be a learned and a conditioned response, and it does come over time. But if in the immediate you're thinking, I need ways of dealing with this, then there are a lot of other ways you can do this. So grounding and stabilizing are ways of really helping you to cope in the moment, to pull yourself back down, to rein all of that external response back within, to sit with it. Okay? And that takes a little bit of practice too. But if you have a list of ideas, of which I've given you in the guide, to really cope with these moments and have them somewhere where you're seeing them. Again, what you're doing is you're sending messages to your subconscious mind that will imprint over time with a little bit of practice and a little bit of repetition. So thinking for yourself in these ways is really useful, because I could talk to you about it and give you all the ideas, but it wouldn't feel personal. And so just like using positive language, which is another coping strategy, all of that language needs to mean something to you, okay? You need to really believe it for it to make any difference at all. So it's all very well me saying to you, here are these affirmations, here's this lovely positive language to help you in these moments. And you could say them, but if you don't feel them and they don't mean anything, then it's not really going to do very much at all. And that's often when we get people saying, oh, this stuff doesn't really work on me. Nah, I've tried it, not really. So we need a bit of dedication, a bit of commitment, and this needs to be your work, not mine. This has got to be real for you. This is a journey that you and your partner, potentially, if you've got one, are going to go through together. And so I've got that on my list here. One of the key things, certainly in terms of dealing with emotions, especially in early parenting, is communication. Especially when we're tired and when we're vulnerable, we do a lot of that second guessing. If our partner is not communicating with us, or a loved one, then we try to second guess, we try to mind read. We think we know what they're thinking. And that can lead to all sorts of problems. So communication is key, okay? And however you manage to do that. Now that can be really hard to do. So perhaps think about writing it down. Writing down how you're feeling and then showing that to your partner, saying, I wrote this down earlier today because this is kind of where I'm at right now. Can we go through this together? What do you think? Now, obviously, if this is going to impact your relationship in a really big way, like dropping a bomb, then it might not be the best time to do it when you've got a newborn in your arms or a young baby. But it might be worth, if it's really biggie, then it might be worth seeking some additional support from a relational counsellor or somebody else that is able to mediate a little between you. Obviously, you know where I'm going here. But most of the time, it's the little things, and it's the things that we can learn to overcome. And of course, when you've got a new baby in between you as a couple, there's going to be a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of the time at the beginning, where you are finding your feet and finding your way. So really do communicate with each other, because that will help. And if you've already got positive coping strategies in place, then talk to your partner about that too. A lot of us have what we call negative coping strategies, which are really avoidance tactics. So escapism, ways of completely avoiding the situation, avoiding the conversation. So if you can recognize yourself doing that as well, that can be another mindful approach to things, and say, okay, I see what I'm doing, I see where I'm going here. So for me, in the early days when I had my first, I used to clean that floor in my house all the time. I cleaned it and cleaned it. I couldn't bear to see it with dust on it, with grubby footprints. I just had that thing where I was just like, that's the one thing I can control. And at the time I hadn't realized it's sort of very mild kind of OCD response. Obviously I'd had a traumatic birth, so this was kind of one of the side effects of that. But a lot of us do that. You don't have, it's, you know, doesn't have to be OCD, but it's just, this is a classic avoidance tactic. Okay, so if you can start recognizing those things in yourself and write them down, it can be very useful, very helpful later on down the line, or when you're communicating with your partner. You just say, look, if you just start seeing me cleaning that floor too often, then it might mean I need talking to, or I need a hug. So a lot of the time, hugs are the answer to so many things without even having to say anything. And hugs are a form of soothing. And obviously when you're having a very emotional response, sometimes you don't even want to be talking, you just need to be held. So thinking about that, thinking about how you can kind of bring this more into your life. In the guide that I have created for you, there are some other ideas, things called anchors. So I don't know if you've come across those before. Have any of you done that? So I'm going to see if you can write some comments for me. Stevie, I'm going to get to your comment in a minute. Thank you. But any of you used anchoring before? What does it mean? Is it just a psychobabble word that I'm pulling out of my hat? Anybody who's done any form of kind of therapy before, or who has perhaps worked with people to help overcome anxiety, for instance? Anchoring is a very common tool to use when you're struggling with anxiety, high anxiety. No, anybody? No, okay. So anchoring is essentially, an anchor is a trigger, and it can be an emotional trigger, it can be a physical trigger, it can be something that just reminds us to respond in a certain way. So when you are experiencing an emotional response that is feeling quite difficult to cope with inside your body, and externally you're feeling it too, then placing your hand over your heart or your chest, perhaps where a lot of that feeling is sitting, can help to anchor in a few things. Firstly, you are stabilizing yourself by doing this. Secondly, you are holding yourself. Thirdly, your hand can feel quite nice and warm and calming and soothing when you're doing this. And if you use this hand on heart or chest anchor for a little while, and then combine it with some language of I am safe, I am okay, I am held, then those are really the three things that we need in that moment when we are feeling overwhelmed, overcome by that strong emotional response, by the anxiety. Perhaps it is even sitting underneath your hand. So try that now. Hand on heart, hand on chest, even if you feel like sometimes people feel it up here. Two hands, if you like. And if you can, take a few breaths. Now, sometimes, like I said, when you're in a strong, heightened emotional response, it's quite difficult to think about breathing, but it is actually one of the best things you can do for yourself because of triggering your parasympathetic nervous system. I'm talking about conscious breathing. Obviously, you'll be breathing. It can help to slow the breath down, and just think to yourself about how it feels to have your hand held here. And say to yourself, I am safe. I am okay. So this is great grounding, great stabilizing, bringing it all back in, helping you to feel held. Fundamentally, that is exactly what we need in those moments, is somebody to hold us. And if there's nobody there to do that, then we have to do that for ourselves. And this is one of the best ways we can do it. So something so simple can actually have such a profound effect on our emotional well-being. And hopefully, after a few minutes of doing this, you will notice that you are feeling more calm. Just perhaps you've got a little bit more clarity of mind to be able to then move on and do something about it. So there are some other ideas for anchors in the guide that I've given you, but also self-soothing is tremendous. So that can be anything from, and you might already do this, making yourself a cup of tea or a hot chocolate, or wrapping yourself up with a blanket or something that's soft and feels calming. Perhaps it is something as simple as finding a bit of beautiful hand lotion and putting that on. Obviously, you know, that's for everybody if they're into that. Finding something nice to smell is particularly good at helping to calm us in the moment. I'm an aromatherapist. I'm a huge advocate for essential oils. I don't believe in using essential oils on young babies. I know that that can do a lot of harm, especially in terms of how they are with you, because they learn through their sense of smell. So we don't want to be putting a barrier up between what they're learning about you and the environment that they're in. So smell to them is really, really, really heightened. But aromatherapy can help us tremendously. So by putting a little drop onto a tissue or a few drops of oil into a carrier oil and rubbing them into your pulse points, breathing them in, goes straight into via your olfactory nerve, which is up your nose, straight into your limbic brain, which is your emotional brain, it's your emotional center. So if you like the smell of lavender or orange or chamomile, those are pretty safe oils to use around a baby in the house, obviously not on or directly near the baby, but those oils are nice and nurturing and good to use too. So think about that. The sense of smell really has a tremendous effect on our emotions and our emotional responses, and also sound. So music, think about music advantage, and also to your baby's advantage if you have a babe in arms. If you've got some hardcore heavy metal playing in the background, it could well be setting your baby off into a frenzy, but also maybe you. Now, you know, I'm not passing judgment at all on that music, but it's really furious. So thinking about the kind of music that you have in your environment, the kind of sounds perhaps that you have in your environment that can help to soothe you as well as your baby, and not do the opposite and get you feeling stressed. Now, we do sometimes need waking up, and there's no harm in having a dance around the house or wherever you feel you need to, because that's going to make you feel good. It's going to produce endorphins, which are your natural feel good, and you're going to feel better. And obviously, hopefully, as a result of that, you'll feel a little bit lighter and then able to be more connected to your baby. But emotions are there to stay, so we have to learn to live with them, good or bad. And these are lots of ideas of being able to cope obviously becoming new parents, learning to go through that first year with baby, all sorts of emotional responses are going to be cropping up. And we need to talk about it. If you keep it bottled up inside, it will find a way of coming out. And usually at times when you really don't need it to, and I'm sure you've all experienced that, those times when you're feeling low and then it comes up to bite you on the bum again. It's like, God, no, don't. I don't want to have to deal with that as well, because we're not dealing with these things. We're shoveling them under. And if we can sit with our emotions, it can help so much. So I've given you lots of ideas here. There are so many more in the guide. Now I'd like to come to Stevie's comment, and if any of you have any other comments that you would like to add, then please do. Any questions? Stevie says, in my 7-week experience of being a mum, the emotions I'm feeling are way more powerful and intense than ever. Oh, I can see you've got lots more. I can see. Yeah, than I ever imagined. Yes, my love. Yes, they will be. And I feel for you, because it's intense. Yeah, absolutely. So the highs are so very high, and the less positive emotions are just as powerful. Yeah, especially when I'm tired. I haven't had the time to read the guide yet today, but I'm very much looking forward to this week's focus. Yeah. When we are at our most tired and our most vulnerable, vulnerability is a way that we need to learn to be with. It's something we have to sit with when we become new parents, and it crops up obviously at other times in our lives. But it is when we are feeling at our most vulnerable, and we need to be feeling our most safe in this time so that we can cope with those highs and the lows as well. And obviously having people supporting us, people that we love and know and trust, that are hopefully going to be non-judgmental, will really help us to express ourselves in those vulnerable times. But yes, I think that what you can do is, I've given you ideas in the guide anyway, of writing down this emotion as it crops up for you. So it helps you to feel like you have some control over that as well. So a lot of the time our emotional responses are as a result of us feeling out of control, of not meeting our expectations, of not meeting other people's expectations, the pressures that are there in our modern day life, our modern day society, the shoulds, the woulds, the coulds. Yeah. Coupled that with the noise levels that you are experiencing, I expect, it can weigh you down. And obviously there's other emotions and other situations that crop in. You could be feeling quite a little bit bored by now. And then, you know, as a result of that, thinking, why am I feeling bored? Well, it can be quite boring if you're on your own with the baby all day. So having to think about how you can start to kind of get out more, or perhaps integrate yourself a little bit more into the community and have conversations about how you're feeling with other parents that happen to be going through these experiences too. And with that brings closeness, a bond that we all need at this time. And sometimes it's good to talk to people that we hardly know. As I say, groups like this are great because you feel hopefully more confident to be able to just say how you feel without worrying about how that's going to affect anybody necessarily in the group. Obviously it's very hard to broach subjects sometimes with our loved ones. So, you know, if it makes you feel better, please do just, you know, share your thoughts here. What else have we got here? I hope that helps, Stevie. Oh, we've got crying, yes. So that babies crying obviously is their way of communicating. I have spoken in the guide about infant mental health and the idea that Dr. Sarah Buckley brings into her book, Gentle Birth, Gentle Mothering, very much about what she calls mutual regulation. So it's like a homeostasis that happens in terms of attachment with parent and baby. And it's really, really interesting to sort of understand this and to see just that we need our babies just as much as they need us, but that at times there is obviously that ambivalent push and pull, and that you can love and need that closeness but also feel very suffocated in the process. And as a result, then of course that can feel very emotive. So thinking about how you can manage that, what can you do for yourselves? And again, thinking about these little coping strategies that you can put into place. How am I going to cope when? If you can feel like you're putting plans into place, even if you don't actually go ahead with them, it helps you to feel like you're more in control. Okay, so I think I've pretty much said everything that I wanted to say. If you think I haven't covered anything else that you would like me to, then please let me know. So here we go, Stevie, thank you, really helpful. Oh, I love the fact that you're here. It just means so much to me, and you know, I really do love to help. I resonate with your floor cleaning. I know so many people do. I recognize after listening to you this evening that when I suppress the low emotions, they manifest in form of tidying. Yeah, I have to have the whole house tidy. My poor partner, he helps me tidy, but wouldn't it be great if decided to talk to him about my feelings instead of barking orders to tidy up? You said it. I know it's not always easy, and if you do, please don't beat yourself up. One of the kindest things we can do is forgive ourselves in the moment for these reactions, and then to try and bank it, note it, and try not to do it again. But if you do, okay, it's all a learning process. It is so important that we learn along the way here and are kind to ourselves. And as I mentioned in the last section, it's all about self-compassion. Be compassionate to yourself. And if it does in one way make you actually genuinely feel better to have a clean house, then I would say then that is a way of being kind to yourself, and explain that to your partner. But then notice if some of that is coming out in a worse way in terms of the language that you use with your partner and it's making them feel bad, then, you know, perhaps you need to have that discussion. But be kind to you. What would you say to a friend in this instance? And I think usually we have the answers within us, and then that way we can reflect that one back. Okay, so please enjoy the guide. Give me feedback. This is a pilot, so if I don't hear from you, I'm just assuming it's all wonderful and brilliant, which is great. But if you do have any ideas, any comments, anything you'd like me to add to the resources, anything in terms of partners as well, in that partners section, obviously the whole thing is for partners too, but I've obviously created that partners section just as a little extra, as an add-on, but this whole guide is for everybody. And I hope that it is really proving to be useful for you. And I do want to just say a very special thank you to Katie Carr, who is my my VA, who is pushing points at the moment, because I don't find this very easy to do. So thank you so much, Katie. I am incredibly grateful to you. She is here right now in the group, and Katie has two little girls, and she has a 6-month-old baby. So I know that, you know, this has been useful for her. And Katie is joining me in my local groups as well, my Beyond Birth groups. And I just wanted to express my gratitude, and obviously gratitude is particularly useful for you and how you feel in terms of emotions as well. So I'm going to leave on that point, but please do spread the word. This guide will be free for people up until the 1st of March. And after that, it will be £35 for anybody that joins up afterwards. So if you've joined now, then it's free for life. But please do tell anybody that you think might benefit from this, because I would love to see this grow and this community grow, and lots more people start to understand the value of mental well-being and mindfulness in late pregnancy and parenting. So lots and lots of love to you from me. Peace, and enjoy the audios, and enjoy the rest of your evening or day or whenever you're watching this. Bye for now.